Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm so glad that you're here because together we're going to work through big stuff. Do you know that there are over 48 symptoms in perimenopause? Over 48. And I recently read that the average woman will be experiencing more than 5 of them at once. But often she will have no idea that the strange sensations or feelings that she's having are related to perimenopause and the depletion or irregularity of hormones in her body. And today I wanted to talk about the top 10 weird perimenopause symptoms that you might not even know that you have. I have realized that I was perimenopausal for years. Years. Do you hear that? Literal years. Maybe even 5, 6 years before I realized the symptoms I was experiencing, the changes I was experiencing in my body, the strange things going on were actually symptoms of perimenopause, which I could have, had I had the information, I could have had support with much earlier. Instead, what happened for me is I got to a point where things became really bad. Things became unmanageable for me. And then I went to the doctor saying, there is something wrong. So for me, I've realized when I was in my early 40s, I would have been 42 or 43, I had frozen shoulder. And I didn't know anything about frozen shoulder in those days. So I had first this frozen shoulder, but the other thing that also started happening for me was I had incredibly painful ovulation. I had never been aware of my ovulation previously throughout my entire life, and all of a sudden, it felt like labor pains, early labor pains. When I very first felt the twinges of ovulation, if I didn't get to Nurofen fast enough, I would have to find a quiet corner to sit and breathe through the excruciating pain for about 45 minutes until that angry egg dropped. And I used to say that it was because I was getting older and my eggs got like teeth and like were really cranky and they would like come out like fighting. And that's what it felt like. And now I know that these are some of the early signs. The other thing that happened for me was my perimenopause went from being a couple of days before my period to like a week and then 2 weeks and literally 3 weeks of the month, I was angry. And my husband, like we used to talk about my PMS as this, like the baseline standard now. I was cranky like that and I was feeling sort of more regulated and normal pretty much only when I was bleeding. And that is another sign of hormone fluctuations that are impacting moods, impacting your capacity to regulate yourself. And I remember being super frustrated and super angry and super reactive. And my husband said, you know, it's really, it can be quite difficult to know how and when to approach you. Like I was like a crazed, rabid bear that might attack and kill at any moment. And I said to him, you have no idea how uncomfortable it is to live in this body, to feel like a rabid bear that might attack at any minute, because it's not my MO. It's not how I usually am. So these are the sort of earlier signs and symptoms for me. And then it really progressed into having anxiety again. I used to have anxiety earlier in my life, and I felt like I'd really gotten on top of that. And then I suddenly had this sort of underlying hum of anxiety. Sleep started to become difficult because I was exhausted, but I would lie there and have, I liken it to a radio station playing in the background. So I'm almost asleep, but there is a an undercurrent of thoughts that I'm aware of. I still struggle with that sometimes, not all the time, but that is an ongoing thing. I am pretty sure that now I am through the peris and into the actual menopause because I haven't really got very many of the symptoms any longer. I do still have one or two, but they are much less than they were. And I am on HRT, so it's really hard to know if I would bleed or not. But it has been quite a long time between bleeds and my last bleed. You know, it was like 11 months before the previous one. So I'm pretty close to like completely done and dusted, which apparently is about to become a bit of a relief. So there is hope, apparently. Things do normalize. But I really wanted to talk about some of the most unusual signs and symptoms and also why. Like, why do we get itchy feet? Like, what is up with the burning feet in bed at night? What is up with the itchy ear hole? What is up with this strange upper boob fat or whatever it is? Why do these physical things happen and how do our hormones impact it? So I am not a perimenopause expert, nor am I an endocrinologist. However, I have lived experience. I have lots of female clients. I have also spoken with my own menopause doctor and naturopaths, and I've done some research. That said, take what I'm saying, Google it, look it up, speak to your endocrinologist, speak to your GP if any of these signs and symptoms, because they can be signs and symptoms of other things. But also, just know all that weird, crazy shit going on for you may be down to your hormones. So, that brain fog and losing words, okay, that is, I think, one of the most frustrating, but it is also something that is quite, I want to say, debilitating emotionally. So as someone who speaks to crowds of people for a living, one of my biggest fears was that I'm going to get in front of a room, lose my train of thought halfway through and not be able to be articulate, not be able to finish an idea and look like I don't know what I'm doing. What I have found actually is that I am not alone often in those rooms, and being able to normalize it, call it out, maybe even say, what's the word I'm looking for? And maybe we land on it, maybe we don't, but we can usually muddle our way through. Normalizing these things in the workplace, in your relationships, normalizing these things makes it easier for everybody to not feel shame or fear around having these signs and symptoms in public. So estrogen regulates the neurotransmitters that support memory and sharp thinking. So when your estrogen drops, right, this is when even throughout your cycle, when you are cycling normally, when your estrogen drops at that time in your cycle, you might experience some of that brain fog and some of that inability to find words. I know a lot of people who have said, you know, when I'm ovulating or when I'm bleeding, I can't find the words. Okay, so these are sometimes signs and symptoms that you've had a little bit throughout your life, but now that your estrogen is dropping and staying dropped rather than fluctuating so much, you might be staying in the brain fog for, you know, a long time, maybe months, maybe years, it feels like. So, yes, recognizing that this is simply a part, I mean, they talk about baby brain, you know, stuff like that, perimenopause brain. It is an actual physical thing that happens to the neurotransmitters when your estrogen drops. It can really rattle you. If you can, I guess, take it with a little bit of a grain of salt and understand that it isn't early onset dementia. I have known some people who have been to the doctor thinking that what was going on for them was a really serious brain malfunction, a big problem, that it was going to be irreparable, irreversible, and lifelong. If you can remember, this is just a season of life and it will change. Also, you can get help and support for it. I am now on HRT and testosterone, androfen, the lady testosterone, not the testosterone as in TRT, or the type of testosterone you would take if I was transitioning to a man. This is just a little low dose to ensure that all of my hormones are at the right level, or as close to as needed for me to operate at the level that I want to. I had indetectable testosterone when I got tested, and a lot of doctors don't look at testosterone in women. They are only looking at estrogen and progesterone. So that's a little note for you. Now, frozen shoulder, that is such an interesting one. One day you might wake up and all of a sudden you can't lift your arm above a certain height. You can't do up your bra. You can't do the things that you have done with ease up until even very recently. And the treatment for it, this is insane, has been either surgery or just leave it, it sorts itself out in 12 months. Now, why do we get frozen shoulder? Estrogen has an anti-inflammatory effect, and when it drops, joints feel it. I actually feel like there is a bit more to frozen shoulder than that, but there is also often like pain in joints and hips. And where I talk about my old lady hips, suddenly my knees start to hurt, my hips start to hurt. But this frozen shoulder is a really interesting one because everybody said to me that I would be stuck with it for 12 months and there is nothing to be done. I did have another injury at like just before it, which to take care of that required a different surgery. So when I went to the shoulder surgeon, he was like, well, I would do this for that and I would do this for that. They are both very, very different surgeries. Now, a surgeon's job is what? It is to cut into people. So that is who the traditional line of medicine referred me through for my shoulder issues. What I did instead is I went to a holistic chiropractor who, when I went to him for something else actually, but when I talked to him about frozen shoulder and said that I had been told that I was going to be stuck with it for 12 months, he said, no, that's crazy. And he did the weirdest thing, right? He came behind me. He did he flicked a bit in my spine, and he flicked a bit off my hip, and he did a little tap, tap, knock, knock here and there on my back. And then he lifted my shoulder all the way up. It hurt a little bit. Yes, but I was able to do the motion, right? My range of motion had been severely impacted for months by the time I went and saw him. And then he said, book in and see me next week. So he did my arm going up to the side in that first session, and then he did my arm coming up to the front the following week. Now, I reckon he probably could have done them both in the first session, but he really just wanted another session from me. But I was astounded that this was fixed in 2 weeks with a holistic chiropractor, not surgery, nor the 12 months of pain that I was told about. So why I'm telling you this is so that you keep asking questions and keep looking for ways to support yourself if you're not getting anywhere or you don't like the first thing that you've been told. Surgery is no joke at any time on any part of your body. So if you can avoid cutting into your body, highly recommend it. So it is sometimes the only resort, but do your investigations first. Do your own research. Do your own looking into your health before you go down a ballistic route. Okay. Now, painful ovulation. This was a really interesting one for me, as I said, because I had zero awareness of my ovulation before. Lots of people who I have talked to about it said that they have always had painful ovulation or they've always been aware of their ovulation, whereas I was not. But if we're looking at changes in your cycle that are different to before, so some people had painful ovulation but pain-free periods, and all of a sudden they've got very painful periods, or any combination of that. So for me, I usually would cycle between one painful period, one really painful breasts in my period, and one where I had nothing. And I sort of went through these 3 monthly cycles. But all of a sudden, my ovulation was incredibly painful. Now, this again doesn't necessarily mean that your angry eggs have teeth. It is a change in the hormones which amplify your inflammatory response in your ovaries. So everything becomes more sensitive. For me, that was one of the most noticeable changes, how excruciating it was. And it was one of the changes that impacted me the most. And it might have only impacted me for 45 minutes or so once a month, but I came to dread it. I was very aware of what I was doing around the time of my ovulation. Could I potentially get caught out somewhere where I would have to go and hide out for 45 minutes and literally breathe my way through it like I was passing a puppy? I found myself many times in this situation where, maybe my husband was there stroking my head while I was literally breathing the calm birth breaths that I used to labor my children. So understanding firstly, or just becoming aware firstly of what your normal is, and then recognizing when things start to become different can be just the early warning signs or the early signals that things are shifting in your body. Now, I had a great doctor. When I went to the doctor, I would have been about 47. I had a great doctor who had a very, very keen interest in women's health. So I was very fortunate, but I know a number of my friends who in their late 40s went to their doctor, and their doctor did one blood test on one day, which shows nothing other than your hormones on that day. And they would say, your hormones are fine, you are not in perimenopause. So friends of mine who's had ringing in their ears, which I'll get to in a moment, ringing in their ears, or, hot flushes, or various different signs and symptoms, fluctuating hormones that were impacting their thyroid, things like that. The doctors had dismissed them or disregarded them and said that you are too young. It's not until you're in your 50s that we really look at this. Most doctors don't have a lot of women's hormone understanding and the latest understanding of it as it is today. I would hope that with all of the new information that's out there that we can access as women, that doctors are arming themselves with more information. However, not all of them are going to. Keep looking for the right doctor. I know that it can be difficult, but there are also women's health doctors that are available online if you are looking for someone who specifically understands the hormonal changes that go on for women and how they impact women, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Which leads me to my next one, the rage. I put a shout out on social media asking for people to share their strangest, the most unusual perimenopause signs and symptoms. And people were coming back with lots of unusual ones, like the itchy ear hole, or like the itchy toe or the tinnitus and different things. And one person came back with one that is not, I don't think, that unusual, but man, it made me laugh. She said, the desire to slap my husband in the face. And I was like, yeah, word. I know that feeling. This uncontrollable rage that seems to come from nowhere. It is reactive with your family. You are snapping at things. Your fuse is very, very short. Things that would have rolled off you before, you are suddenly like really agitated by, and that can then lead to crying or crying in anger or anger crying or any combination of emotional dysregulation that is not your usual MO. Now, this is estrogen and progesterone that regulate your emotional processing. So when either one of those is skewed at any stage of your cycle, that can make it harder for you to regulate yourself, right? Your nervous system is running hot, but you don't have the same buffer that you used to. So you can support your system throughout perimenopause with a range of different things, whether you're going to go the HRT route or you're going to go like the more natural route, or you're going to try, there are various products that claim to. I used a number of natural products for a number of years before it reached a point where that just wasn't helping anymore. But there are things like Happy Mammoth. There was another green thing that I took for a while, which was very helpful. Some people swear by, seed cycling. I also went to the naturopath for a couple of years and took tonics that helped to regulate my hormones or help to support my system throughout the beginning of perimenopause, but it really did just reach a place where it was untenable for me. But once you start not recognizing yourself, it can feel like everybody else is the problem, right? Because they are so annoying, right? And they really are. The issue really is that your capacity to withstand the annoyance of everyday life, and everyday life is very, very taxing. There's no doubt about it, particularly when you reach this age, because you are juggling so much. You are often at the peak of your career because you've been in the industry for so many years because of your age, all right? So understanding that it is not you. You are not suddenly this uncontrollable, unable to manage yourself, unable to regulate, hot mess. It is your hormones. It is a stage of life that all women are going to go through. Women have gone through it for a millennia. Women have suffered and struggled through it for a millennia, and we no longer need to white knuckle it and do it alone. There has been so much more research into it, and there is so much more help available these days that we really don't need to white knuckle it, and we really do need to bang on about it. The more we talk about it, the more our families, our partners, our mother-in-laws, everybody understands the ramifications of a hormonal imbalance that might be happening because it is a natural thing to happen, but doesn't need to be as vicious or violent as it has been in previous generations because the support is there. We do not just have to put up and shut up. We do not just have to white knuckle it and hope for the best. The other thing that is super, super common, so not a really unusual one, but I really think that it needs its own place here in this podcast, is anxiety that comes out of nowhere. My mum said to me that she never experienced anxiety in her entire life except when she went through perimenopause. She said that she feels like she really breezed through perimenopause quite easily, except for hot flushes and low-level anxiety, this low-level hum that just seems to be there no matter what your stress level is like. Now, I will also say in my mum's case, she was a single woman who lived on her own. I really think that would help with the other symptoms of perimenopause, mostly talking about the rage that we feel at husbands and teenagers and just general public in general. So that anxiety, that heart racing, that feeling of impending doom, the feeling of dread, that low, like that sort of low level or high level anxiety that you can wake up with and just sits with you all day for no apparent reason. There is nothing different going on. You don't have any major stresses in your life. It is just kind of this omnipresent thing. Now, this is because the estrogen influences your GABA receptors, and that is your brain's calming system, right? So when there is less estrogen, there is less calm. Now, you can take GABA supplements. That is a thing, right? Lots of women are, at this time, diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and there is a huge amount of women who are put onto SSRIs or anxiety and depression medication at this time of their life, right? Now, there is no shame in that if that's what you need to get through, but there is often a misdiagnosis of anxiety when it is a hormonal imbalance. So it's almost like the anxiety and depression medication can be like a Band-Aid for a symptom as opposed to fixing the root cause. Now, that said, I have very, very dear friends who are on HRT and have really a high anxiety that is off the charts, and they need anxiety medication. The stigma around taking medication for your mental health really needs to be kicked in the ass, because it is about helping yourself to get through a period of your life as unscathed as humanly possible. Because if you fry yourself trying to white knuckle it at this stage of life, your quality of life can go down so greatly that it really feels quite pointless. I'm going to get to the stats on that in a moment, but I really want to impress upon you that if any of your signs and symptoms are making your quality of life feel like it is hopeless, endless, and horrible, get support and help. You do not need to do this alone. One of the things that really surprised me, alongside suddenly having anxiety back, suddenly having, these signs and symptoms, is a sudden loss of self-esteem. I suddenly felt like, what is the point? What is the point of me getting up? What is the point of me showing up? None of this matters anyway. There was a real sense of hopelessness and nihilism. And that was very unusual for me. That was one of the things that tipped me off that something was wrong. Now I know that was approximately 5 or 6 years into my perimenopause journey. Now remember, perimenopause can last 10 or more years, like insane. But it was almost like the frog in the pot, okay? So it starts as 1 or 2 things, and then it sort of increases until one day everything just feels really hopeless and it's untenable. Don't be me. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you feel like you can't get out of bed. Go and get some help. Okay, so even though I seem to have almost all of I've got most of my symptoms under control, certainly my mental health ones are under control, what I do have, which I think is really weird, and I had no idea this was a perimenopause symptom, itchy, burny feet in bed at night. It's nuts. They are so itchy and burny at night that I started looking into, do I have early stages of multiple sclerosis? Because as you know, that is what my mum died of. And there is a possibility that it is hereditary. And I do not care to do the tests to find out if I have the gene because I don't want to live with that. I would rather live my beautiful, healthy life, take care of myself as best as I can, and I either find out one day or I don't. I feel like if I had an awareness of that, I would potentially stress myself enough to bring it on. Now, that itchy, burny sensation, lots of women who answered my shout out on social media said that, their skin all over their body, their skin on their shoulders, really specific places, their skin, like inside of the ear is super itchy. What happens with that sensation on the skin? Often women will also talk about dryness. Now, my hands, feet, cuticles are all like quite cracked, dry, peely. All of me is not necessarily that dry, but this is all still part of it, okay? So estrogen helps to maintain your skin's moisture, but also nerve sensitivity. So that's what that itchy burny is, right? It's the nerve sensitivity impacted by a lack of estrogen. So when that drops, your histamine levels rise, and then your skin barrier functions can shift and shimmy and change. Your nervous system starts misfiring itch signals when there is actually nothing there. What? Your nervous system is lying and making you feel itchy when there is actually nothing to be itchy about. That tingling is it's a nervous system misfire. So people start to think that they have new allergies. Okay, what am I allergic to? Am I allergic to myself? Why is my skin so itchy? Here it is. But I will tell you that itchy, burny feeling in your feet at night or in your shoulders or wherever it is can be maddening, and you can scratch holes in yourself. So again, how can we treat it? What can we do? Get the support for it. I don't know how. Right? All I know is to get your hormones as under control, as back to baseline normal as possible to bring all of your symptoms back under control, right? I don't think that any of these things can be treated in isolation. They are a systemic problem. The other thing that is super weird is that the ear weirdness. Ear weirdness, we're going to call it. All sorts of things. Ringing in the ears is one of the most common. Ringing in the ears. It can be periodic. It can just be like for a few moments at a time. It can be for a day. Some people have it all the time. The ringing in the ears, the tinnitus. Muffled hearing and sensitivity to sound. Yes, all of a sudden I have become very, very sensitive to sound, and I'm finding myself saying, what? Pardon? Huh? More. The muffled hearing is super interesting to me. The estrogen, the neurological stability that estrogen provides, once that shifts, again, it creates these changes in your inner ear, right? In your inner ear. And that is so weird to me because it feels like that should be completely unconnected to not only your sort of reproductive wellness, your reproductive well-being, but also your hormones. Okay, your hormones and your hearing, how are they connected? One is a sense, right? And the other is, it's a system thing. Just goes to show you are a whole being. When one thing is amiss, all things can get pushed out of whack, right? So the reason that all of this matters, all right, and I've touched on it a couple of times, the reason that all of this matters, when you're in your late 30s or your early 40s or your mid 40s and you raise it with your doctor and your doctor maybe dismisses you or maybe says, let's look into it a little bit, but I don't think that you're menopausal. What can happen is you push the signs of the symptoms under the rug and you begin to feel dismissed and like you are the problem. When we wait until things get really bad before we get support with it, what can happen is things do slide into that space of feeling helpless and hopeless. One of the biggest times in women's lives where they start to have suicidal ideation is 45 to 55 years old, according to the recent stats. Now, if this is the highest rate of suicidal ideation in women, also bear in mind this is the most dangerous time for a woman to just leave her marriage, leave her family. And I will tell you, lately, I have understood that completely. When you don't have adequate support and you feel like you are doing it all on your own, strange and crazy shit can happen in your head. And this is a problem. And when I say it's a systemic problem, I don't mean in your personal system. I mean with the world, with the medical system. Women need to have greater support at this time of their lives because it is such an enormous change. Now, they say that when you get through perimenopause, the menopause years are amazing. You enter your I don't give a fuck era. You enter your crone era, which is known to be the wise woman. It is an era of empowerment, giving less shits about everyone else, saying goodbye to the good girl. All of that sounds incredible, but you've got to get yourself there first. This is why it is really important to be armed with all of the information that is out there now and to take that information to your doctor and ask for support. If your first doctor, second doctor, third doctor don't give it to you, continue knocking on doors. You don't have to do it alone. But research out at the Liverpool John Moores University found that 1 in 6 women attending a specialist hormone clinic reported suicidal thoughts in the 2 weeks before their appointment. And then listen to this, right? In that same study, those thoughts reduced by more than 90% after hormone treatment. Women have been suffering unnecessarily for decades, generations, eons, forever. This is the generation that can change that when we get the help and when we accept the help and when we understand that modern medicine has come a long way towards supporting us in our hormone health. We were not designed to live beyond child rearing age, but we are actually now living, we can actually have a whole other lifetime after we finish our reproductive years. So I'm 50. I think I'm menopausal. Imagine if I live to 100. So I'm not giving you this so you go on a list of things to panic about, a list of things to be on the lookout for and be like, oh my God, this is about to get awful for me. This is helping you to understand some of the lesser known or more surprising signs and symptoms. So when or if it happens to you, you know that this is because there is a shift going in your body and it is not just you. It is not a problem with you. It is an imbalance in your system. When you know what is happening, then you can get the support to help you through it. So I landed on the perfect combo for me, which has been the HRT, testosterone, and my ADHD meds. That was a really huge part. I have done another episode on that incredible spicy combo of neurodiversity and perimenopause and how that mule has a particular kick. But you might not want to go down the same route as me. And it's about finding what works for you and knocking on the doors until you get there. You are not going crazy. You are not suddenly less capable. You are not losing your mind or your edge. You are going through one of the biggest transitions you are ever going to go through, and you deserve information, support, and understanding. And I advise that you start with all of that within yourself. Thanks for listening, and let me know if you've got any weird and wacky signs and symptoms that you want to share, because the more we know, the more we know. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode of Big Stuff as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, it would really help me if you wanted to share it with just one person that you think is going to get something out of it. And also feel free to drop a comment. All of these things really help podcasts to gain more ears, and that's what we're really here for. Also, be sure to subscribe, then you will never miss an episode. If you want to find out more about me, who I am, what I do, then you can go and check me out at daniellecolley.com.au. I'll see you next episode for more Big Stuff.